Hello again, I'm Dave Thomas, and this time I'm building the Quest Apex model rocket. Now, if you've built the Quest Seeker, you're going to find that this is very much similar to it, and that particular rocket was the subject of my previous video. So if you've already done the Seeker, this one's going to go together almost exactly the same. Uses a lot of the same parts and such. Alright, if you haven't built the Seeker, well, this will be new to you. So this one's got some really fancy packaging here, and I'm going to cut this open and we'll make sure that everything is where it needs to be. Once we have all the contents of the box or bag dumped out here, we'll want to check them against our instruction sheet. So we have some self-adhesive decals. Alright, we have the parachute, shroud lines, and then these little self-stick reinforcements, so those all go together. Alright, we have a Kevlar shock cord and an elastic shock cord. We have the nose cone here, and notice it does not have a base and it does not need one. Okay, next we have two body tubes here. This is the upper body tube, this is the lower body tube. Mine's got a little bit of a crunch in it there, but we'll be able to fix that during the assembly. We'll just make sure and make this the aft end. And in fact, right now, just so I don't forget that, I'm going to write aft right on the inside of there. Because when I put the fin can assembly in there, that will put that back out where it should be. Okay, speaking of which, this is the fin can, alright, or fin assembly. It comes in two halves. This is a retainer for the fin assembly. This is the motor retainer, motor mount tube, transition, and this little red piece here is going to go in the base of the transition like that. Okay, and then we have four fins, and then this is a stand, and this just pops it together like this. Okay, so just run one piece into the other, making sure you're in these channels right here. There we go, and just slide that all the way up, and then when you're done, your rocket will fit on top of that. So the first two parts of our instructions will call for both of the shock cords here, and then we'll also need the motor mount tube and the fin can assembly. So first of all, untangle the two shock cords. And then what we're going to do is line up two ends here like this. Alright, and you want those to be about 1 inch long when we're finished. So about this much, and we're going to tie a single overhand knot. Okay, and we still want some fairly long pieces out here. Now, this is a little less critical in this kit. Some of Quest's other kits that use streamers actually use this knot and free end here to help hold the streamer in place. All right. Once you've got that there, then take a little dab of white glue or wood glue and just put that onto the knot. And this is just a little additional safety here so that this does not come undone. Does not take a lot. Just a little dab there and just kind of work that into the knot. And then if you want, you can also put some on the ends to keep them from fraying. Okay. And again, it doesn't take a lot. You can just kind of work those in a little bit there. Okay. Now we need the other end of the Kevlar. And on one of the two halves here, there's this little loop projection. Okay, so this, the Kevlar is going to go through that. And if you put a little kink in it, sometimes it makes this easier. Alright, so we're just going to insert that one way or another. Okay. And to retrieve that, sometimes it's a little bit difficult. You can use like the tip of a pencil or some fine, I don't know where that little white piece came from, some fine tweezers here, and just pull that through. Okay, now we're going to tie a double knot on this. Okay, here, if you get tinier fingers, it helps. I'm trying to minimize the amount of the free end there. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to tug this upwards, so now that the main part of the shock cord is coming up like this. Okay, now Kevlar, as you can see there, it doesn't hold knots very well. So I like to use just a little tiny dab of super glue on the Kevlar just to lock it in place there. Okay, make sure you're not using super glue on the elastic here, as it will eat through that. Okay, so now if we turn over one of the two fin can pieces here, the motor mount, the forward end has two slots cut in it, and those go on these rectangular pegs on the forward end of the fin can. So there's one there, and there's also one here. All right, I'm just dry fitting these to make sure everything goes together. Now if you notice here, when I put that together, it kind of squashes the tube there. I don't think that's intentional, so we need to find out what's going on here. Okay, there's nothing there that can be changed. And this might just be a slight design flaw. See if I turn that over. I don't think it'll make any difference. Nope. Okay, so that is going to get squished in there. All right, now, the two projections in there also act as the thrust ring or the engine block. And I'm just going to hold this together like it would be. And I'm going to take a motor here and stick it in. And it looks like it's still going to be functional there. So even though your motor mount's going to be squished on the top, this is all still workable. So we will go with it. Alright, to glue the two halves together, we want to use plastic cement, and we need to apply it to all of the edges here that are raised. Now the edges down in here, right, when those are together, they don't actually meet. And so this is where the fins are going to go. So we don't want glue in here at this time. Okay. For this you can either use the tube type cement that they show there. I like to use a brush-on type plastic cement just because I've got a little bit more control. The disadvantage to the brush-on types is it tends to dry very quickly, sometimes before you're ready for it to dry. So just keep that in mind. And you might have to put on more than one coat if it's drying before you can get to it. Alright, so now I'm going to put my engine mount back in. Alright, and then sandwich it back together here. Okay, and I'm going to hold that in place for about 30 seconds or so to make sure that the glue grabs. And one of the things you can do with the brush-on type cement is if it looks like you missed something or something didn't get quite enough glue, you can go ahead and put a little bit of cement using the brush down in the crack there. Okay, it looks like mine came out fine. Okay, so after I hold this for just a few more seconds longer, I'm going to set it aside and let it dry completely. If the glue does not dry completely, this will probably pop apart while we're putting the fins on. While the glue on my fin can is drying, I'm going to skip the fin step here and move on to step 4. And this is the assembly of the payload section here. So this will be the narrower white tube. And then we're going to need the transition and the nose cone, and then also the transition base here. So for this part, we're going to use some tube type cement, like this. You can use the brush-on cement as long as this has got a really snug fit. If it's loose at all, you'll want to use the tube type. Okay, so just run a bead of glue around the inside of that transition, and apply the base piece, kind of turn it back and forth to seat it, and then go ahead and set that aside for a few minutes. We won't have to wait too long on it. Okay, now what this little additional instruction that came with it is stating is that if you don't want the payload section here, if you just like to fly this as a rocket, you can glue the nose cone on. But it is intended to be removable. Okay, so that you could actually put a payload in here, like an altimeter or a cricket or whatever. Okay, now this has got a really loose nose, so we don't want it coming off in flight or during recovery. So we're going to add some masking tape to that. Alright, and as loose as this is, I'm going to give it a full circumference to start. So I'm just going to wrap that all the way around. Let it overlap just a bit there. Okay, I'm going to test fit that. There we go, that's really snug, which is what we want, because we don't want this to come off at all unless we're on the ground and you can give it a really firm grip. Now, depending on the weather, changes in temperature and humidity can change how well this grips, and so you'll want to check this at every launch. Okay, so that's all we need there. Alright, and then we need to glue the transition piece in here. Okay, and for this, they show using the tube type cement again. I prefer to use a gel type super glue, and the reason for that is that we're gluing two dissimilar surfaces here. So we've got plastic going to cardboard, and I found that the gel type super glue actually works a bit better for this. If you don't have it, the tube type cement will work as well. The runnier super glue or the brush-on cement will not work here. It'll just absorb into the cardboard and won't give a good bond to the adapter there, to the reducer. Alright, so here, whichever one you use, put in a fairly generous bead, because this will need to fill a little space as well. That was not a nice tight fit. Okay, and then we're going to put that in, kind of seat it again. Alright, and then make sure that's on there centered and straight. Okay, and then I'm going to set this aside to dry as well. Now, while we still are waiting for glue to dry, I'm going to move on to step 5 here and start assembling the parachute. So first of all, just lay this out. Okay, and in my kit this came pre-cut. In some Quest kits you have to cut it out of a sheet of plastic. And now we're going to take the self-stick reinforcements here and add those. All right, so as you peel these up, leave that white dot behind, and then this will simply go over the hole at each corner. After the reinforcements are applied, then go ahead and take the shroud material here, and this is really kind of knotted together pretty tightly. I think it's supposed to be a loose knot. We're going to need to tease that apart. Again, those of you with smaller fingers will probably have an easier time of this. This has the makings of turning into a huge mess. Okay, there should be 3 lines here. Just do this gently, so if you do have a knot, you don't make it permanent. Alright, go ahead and just pull these out, straighten them, and then check to make sure they're all the same length. Okay. And they are. Lo and behold. Alright, so now what we're going to do is for each of these holes we're going to tie a shroud to 2 adjacent corners here. So just pass this through the hole, and then you're simply going to tie a double knot in it, or 2 half hitches. And the key here is to try and get them all the same size, so you have about the same amount here on that free end of the knot. Okay, and then we'll just simply come to the next one, do the same thing. Okay, so there's the first one, so you should have a loop like that. And then I'm going to continue this all the way around. Now, once you have all the corners tied, then go ahead and turn this over and gather up all of the shroud line loops here. Okay, I'm just going to stick these on one finger, and then in your other hand here, grab the center of the parachute, and then we're just going to pull these taut. And if we did this right, all of the corners should be coming down at approximately the same place, and they are. And my loops don't have anything that's obviously loose or one that's tighter than the others. So it looks like we did a good job there. Now to attach this, we've got a couple of options. what the instructions show is permanently tying them to our transition piece here. Okay, so if you want to do that, take the loops of your parachute in your hand here and just pass those through. Okay, and then you'll take those the entire parachute here, pass them through the loops like this, and then snug that down. Now I'm not actually going to do it because I don't like to do my parachutes that way. Okay, what I prefer to do is to attach parachutes using a snap swivel. So these are the same things you use for fishing, and you can find them in the fishing area of most department stores and sporting goods stores and such. So here I'm going to once again gather up all of my loops. Okay, just like we did previously here. Okay, get those all nice and taut. And now I'm just going to grab this so I don't change my loop lengths and just narrow this down. Okay, and so we're going to stick it through the swivel end here of the snap swivel. So all those loops have to pass through there. Okay, and I'm going to open those back up. So now I'm hanging here, and I'm going to take the entire swivel, pass that up through the loops, and pull the loops downward here. Alright, and I'm going to pull that taut. So that forms a little knot right at the base there. Check my loops again, make sure I haven't shifted anything. And then to keep that from moving, I'm going to add just a little dab of white glue or wood glue to that. Okay, just a little tiny amount, and work that in. And that'll just keep that knot from coming undone. Okay, and now when I'm ready to put my parachute on, okay, all I need to do is open up the swivel or the snap end here, clip that onto the base of the transition. Okay, and now that can move around freely on there. And if I need to, I can change out the parachute easily. A lot of Rocketeers prefer to store their parachutes outside of their rocket so they don't remain all crumpled up. So after my launch, I can just come and pop that back off. Or maybe, you know, I didn't get quite enough recovery wadding in there and I melted my parachute. It's a really easy thing to do, just to pop this off, put a new parachute on, and you're ready to launch again. The other advantage this has is in the swivel itself. So as the parachute's coming down, unless everything is exactly the same size, parachutes tend to spin as they come down, and this can cause a winding of the shroud lines here all the way up, and if it continues too much, it'll actually collapse the chute. By having that snap swivel in there though, the swivel allows the torsion in the parachute lines to be relaxed by simply turning this around. Okay, so I found it's definitely worthwhile to do this. The size of the snap swivel really doesn't matter for the weight of the rocket. The rockets are all pretty light here. What you may need to get a bigger one for is if you've got a nose cone or a transition like this that might have a really heavy eyelet there, and so you might have to get a snap swivel that has a bigger snap piece on it. But that's really the only thing you need to consider. So I'm going to take this back off for now and set that aside as well. And at this point we can go ahead and attach the fin can to the body tube. Now remember, in my particular case I had a little bit of a crunch down here in the body tube, so this is where I'm going to put it in. And to help keep the shock cord out of the way, you can do this. I'm just going to feed the shock cord back in through the forward end of the motor mount and out the back here, and I'm just going to gently pull that through. Okay, but that's going to keep the shock cord out of the way and also help keep me from gluing it to the inside of the body tube. Alright, so I'm going to dry fit this first. Okay, and that puts the squish part back into shape there. Okay, now here again the instructions call for tube type plastic cement, and just like on the upper body tube here, I'm going to opt for gel type super glue instead, but either one will work. Okay, and I'm just going to run a bead of glue, fairly heavy, all the way around. Just like that. Okay, and here's where having the shock cord back out of the way helps, because this way when we put this in we won't accidentally glue the shock cord to the body tube. So now just go ahead and put this in, give it a little twist back and forth to seat the glue well. Okay, and then just set this aside for at least 5 minutes. I'd give it 10 to 15 and let that glue dry completely, and then we'll come back and put the fins on. Now that the fin can has had time to dry inside the body tube there, I'm going to reverse what I had done earlier. And so I'm going to run the shock cord back up all the way through. Okay, and then just pull it all the way through from the other end here. Be careful that the knot might get caught inside, just be aware of that. Okay, and just make sure that nothing got hung up on the little projections inside there. Okay, now for the fins, the first thing we'll want to do is just test fit them. So these fit in like this and shove forward. Okay, and then check them from behind. Now there's not a whole lot you can do if they're off due to the fin can. But if you do see a fin that's off, make sure it's not because of something that you did there. Okay, now to glue these on, you can do one of two things. What they show is to pull the fin back off. Okay, and then apply some tube type cement to the inner edge there. Alright, and you see that's really kind of sloppy. My cement kind of likes to run out a lot, so I'm going to take some of that off. Okay, and then you just put this back in the slot and push it forward. Okay. The other thing you can do is if you're using a brush-on type cement, you can simply leave the fin in place and then use the brush right along the seam. And the cement will travel into the seam via capillary action. And that will glue it in place. Now it turns out, because this has a rear retaining ring that we'll put on in a moment, you can actually assemble this without gluing the fins. I'm going to continue the rest of my fins using this method. And the other nice thing about this method is that if you get all done and you find a loose fin or something like that, you can simply go through and add another little bit of cement to it. Alright, and if your brush happens to go off of where you wanted it to, like mine just did there, just let it dry. Don't try and wipe it or anything. When this stuff dries, it's pretty unnoticeable. Okay. Alright, and then once that's in place, this black ring has two tabs on the inside, and that fits into these two slots here. So that just pops on, and then you give it a twist like that. Okay, so that now there are these little projections here on the outside. Those should line up with the fins. Okay, and then you really don't even need to glue that, but if you want, I would recommend using the brush-on cement here. Nope, I was right. Don't get them in the holes there, as it could interfere with the motor retainer. Okay, so like that. And go ahead and let that dry. Now the motor retainer here, I'm going to show you this just to show how it fits on, but you don't want to leave this on while the glue's still wet. So this is going to go on like this. Keep that where it's supposed to be. Alright, but you have two projections here, one here, and those go into the slots. You really can't see them from the outside, they're right inside, and then that twists like that to hold the motor in. Okay, so if I put a real motor in here and make sure everything's going together, alright, then that twists like that and holds it in place. So that's telling me that everything inside here, including that little bit of a squish at the end of the motor mount, is still allowing the engine to be where it's supposed to be. Okay, I'm going to leave this off until my glue completely dries. But while that's going on, go ahead and take the other end of the elastic shock cord and tie that onto the base of the transition here. Okay, just need a double knot. And go ahead and pull that from all directions here so that it cinches down nicely. And once again, go ahead and add just a little dab of white glue or wood glue to that as a precaution to keep it from coming undone. So it's always disappointing when you get a shock cord separation during recovery. Okay, and then on the free end here, cut that back to about 1/4 inch or about 6 millimeters, and that'll just help keep it from getting stuck up alongside there. And if you want, you can go ahead and put a little bit of glue on that as well, just as a fray check. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and temporarily here put the shock cord down inside the main body tube here, as I just want to check the fit of my transition with the plate in place. Alright, now if I do a shake test here, that comes out way too readily, and so that could result in separation during launch, and we don't want that. So here again, I'm going to apply some masking tape to the shoulder. And as loose as this was, it's probably going to need at least a full circumference. So that's just a little bit over one circumference there. And now if I put this in, okay, give it a shake test now, and that's not coming out, but I can pull it out fairly easily. Okay, so that's about what we want. Alright, and you may have to recheck this before each launch, because changes in temperature and humidity can change how well that's going to grip there. Okay, and so then we can put our nose cone back on, like that. Okay, and then when you're ready for launch, don't forget to put the parachute back on if you haven't done so already. I'm going to leave it off right now since the knot on my shock cord is still a little bit wet with glue. Alright, but like I showed you before, if you're using the snap swivel, all you have to do is put this onto the same eyelet that the shock cord's on. Be sure to clip it in place, and then that will be ready to go. If you have the permanently attached parachute, then it's already on there and you just need to fold it up, stuff it in. If you're actually going to launch this, you will want to put in 3 to 4 squares of recovery wadding, loosely wadded up into the main body tube here before the parachute goes in. Alright, the last thing to do is to apply the decals, and you can use the recommended layout that it shows here in step 7, but you don't have to. Okay, you can fly this without any decals. The decals don't add to the aerodynamics. Okay, so for the main apex decal there, I'm going to put it on the side opposite the launch lug so that when this is sitting on the launch pad, you'll see the decal there. Okay, now I recommend that you wash your hands well before doing this, so you've got fewer body oils that will interfere with the adhesive. Alright, and these are going to tend to stick fairly quickly, so just lightly place them on to begin with to make sure that you've got that where you want it and hopefully centered in both directions. That looks to be pretty good. And then once you've got it where you want to, start at the middle and then work your way toward the outside, sealing this down and removing bubbles from underneath it. Okay, now I'm not going to do all of these on the video, but we'll give you some idea here. So for the stripes here, the longer stripe decals go down here on the main body tube. The smaller stripe decals go on the payload section. And again, you can put these wherever you want. They're putting them at the edges of each one. Okay, so for my upper body tube here, I'm going to put the red stripes next to the blue transition, and I like to put the beginnings and endings of them kind of in the same area as my launch lug side. Again, so if they don't quite meet or they overlap a little bit, you won't see it on the launch pad. Okay, so I've got those lined up nicely there. Okay, and something I found over the years is that some of these self-stick decals, they look great when you first put them on and you come back like a day later and they've started to peel up. I've never found a really ideal solution to that, but a fairly okay solution is that you can run just a very, very small bead of the runny type of super glue just right along that, and then don't touch it. Okay, don't try and wipe it, don't try and shape it, just leave it alone till it dries. And that's given me satisfactory results, not really outstanding results, but it's better than nothing. Hopefully your adhesive is good and it won't even have that problem. Okay, for the larger ones here, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of that transition. Okay, so again, I'm going to put the red next to the blue. And use the transition itself as kind of a guide here. You want this to go right adjacent to it, but not actually on top of the transition. Okay. Alright, now these trapezoidal ones, they look clear. I think they're supposed to have numbers on them. Oh, I see. Okay, so these are just color. So what you can do is put these on the fin tips. Like that. Okay. And you can either, there's 4 of them, so you could put like one on either side of 2 of the fin tips, or you can put one on the same side of each fin tip, and then put the flag ones here on the opposite. So if I come over here, if I've got the white patch there on the right fin there of the pair, facing pair, then I can put the flag over here on the left side. Attempt to get it straight. There we go. Okay, I'm not going to do all these on camera, but it just gives you an idea here how each one of these decals is showing to go on. And again, this is your rocket. Decorate it however you want to. It is meant to be unpainted, but you could paint it as well. Although really I kind of like the color scheme the way it is, so I don't think I would want to improve on it, because sometimes those improvements just go astray and they don't work out quite the way we want it to. Okay. Again, once your glue is completely dry inside the fin can, you can go ahead and put this motor retainer into place. And then, if your kit came with the stand, that goes right in there. And you really can't see it because my camera's in the way. Right, but that'll allow it to stand nicely. With that, I hope you had a great time building this kit. It went together in my real time in about 2 hours, and that includes all the glue drying time. And I would give this another at least half an hour before I go out and launch it. Have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.